maybe through a wrong turn, maybe through an injury they treated with an opioid just to relieve the pain. Or maybe on a night out when they were just having a few drinks and were offered something that was supposed to make the night a little more interesting, but was laced with a deadly poison in the form of fentanyl. Their lungs stopped and they were gone forever. During the lost Liberal decade, we've seen this problem metastasize out of control. It's not that the Liberals have failed to take action. They have taken action. They've taken a lot of action. They caused this crisis. They decriminalized crack, heroin, cocaine, illicit fentanyl in partnership with the NDP government. They provided millions of dollars in tax-funded opioids, which spread on our streets, were resold to children, and the proceeds used to buy more deadly fentanyl. They removed mandatory jail time for mass fentanyl traffickers, allowing the monsters and mass murderers who brought about this crisis and profit from it to be released from prison with very little penalty at all. They set up drug dens in otherwise safe communities where addicts are fed dangerous drugs, then children in nearby neighborhood schoolyards are forced to step on dirty needles or encounter other drug paraphernalia. The Vancouver police have pointed out this problem, and yet the Liberals refuse to listen, going further to expand these radical policies. Policies, I might add, that are not done anywhere else in the world. These are radical and extremely bizarre social experiments. And British Columbia has been the ground zero for this massive, deadly Liberal failure. British Columbia is probably the worst place for fentanyl overdoses in the world as a direct result of Liberal NDP policies. Overdoses are up 200% nationwide, and more than that here in BC. The Vancouver Police Department has said that roughly half of all hydromorphone seizures were diverted from the hard drug program that the Liberals and the NDP fund, while the Waterloo Regional Police and Niagara Police have said hydromorphone seizures are up by more than 1,000%. Hydromorphone is the taxpayer-funded drug that the Liberals are distributing. And in downtown Vancouver, the downtown east side, fear of drug chaos has driven away businesses. Once thriving Chinese community businesses are forced to move further and further away to avoid the danger. Total visits last year were almost up 10% compared to the year before. Shoplifting was up 12%, and the storefront vacancy rate is at 15%. Pendant la décennie perdue des libéraux,
over the last Liberal decade,
on a vu cette crise
we have seen this crisis grow even worse. The Liberals caused it. They launched a dangerous experiment that provided free access to drugs, bringing chaos on our streets. The Liberals distributed hard drugs funded by taxpayers that are often diverted and resold to children or other vulnerable Canadians. In British Columbia, where the Liberals gave authorization to the New Democrat government to decriminalize hard drugs, we have seen an increase of 200% in overdose deaths. And we have seen from the police that many of the seizures of hydromorphone come directly from the government program. Police in Waterloo and Niagara have noticed an increase of seizures of hydromorphone of more than 1,000%.
Despite the obvious death and despair, sadly, the Liberals refuse to change. Mark Carney recently told a group of Liberal supporters that fentanyl is not a crisis in Canada, just in the United States. It's hard to believe how anyone could be so out of touch. And he can't be trusted to change course. In fact, he doesn't want to. He's doubled down and recruited candidates who are even too radical for Justin Trudeau. For example, his handpicked candidate said, and I quote, liberals would be smart to lean into drug decriminalization. And another said, legalizing all drugs would be good for Canada. Carney's star Liberal candidate in Vancouver is Gregor Robertson, an early advocate of drug decriminalization and unsafe government-funded supply. He wrote to a House of Commons committee studying the issue of drug dens, these consumption sites, and he said that local community opposition should be ignored. I'm going to quote him here. Factors such as the impact of the site on crime rates and expressions of community support or opposition should not be relevant to the federal government's approval process. I want you to digest that statement for a moment. Factors such as the impact of the site on crime rates and expressions of community support or opposition should not be relevant to the federal government's approval process for drug consumption sites. So this Liberal candidate who's running today, newly recruited by Mark Carney, says that even if drug dens jack up crime rates in a given community, they should be able to go ahead. This is a federal decision under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. And the Liberal team want more of these. Liberals want more of these drug dens in every single community in our country. No wonder that when Gregor Robertson was mayor of Vancouver, overdoses increased by 600%. For 3 terms in government, the Liberal Party has caused the addiction crisis to spiral out of control. The question in this election is, can we afford a 4th Liberal term of rising crime, drugs, and chaos? Or is it time for a new Conservative government to stop the drugs, treat addiction, and bring our loved ones home drug-free for a change? We need a new Conservative government that can reverse this radical experiment and move the country towards hope and change. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here today to announce that a new Conservative government will fund recovery for 50,000 Canadians who need it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we've lost 50,000 people to overdoses. The least we can do is, in their honor, save 50,000 more. Let their loss not be in vain. To fund this program, we will end federal funding for opioids, defund the drug dens, sue the opioid manufacturers and consulting companies who created this crisis. We will eliminate back office bureaucracy, and we will fund directly those people who need the help through groups that have success in delivering drug-free outcomes. And make no mistake, we will be shutting down drug dens. We will ban drug dens within 500 meters of schools, hospitals, daycares, playgrounds, and other places where the community is vulnerable. We will, let's be clear, these drug consumption sites do not work. And I'm going to quote the Lancet Commission study on this right now. There is no evidence that accessing a site lowers an individual's risk of fatal overdose over time, or that sites lower community overdose rates. We owe it to our fellow citizens who are still struggling with addiction to offer them a real chance to avoid adding to that terrible number of losses we've had already. We will expand access to recovery services with proven track records. These organizations, like the Oak Centre in Winnipeg, or Harvest House in Ottawa and Atlantic Canada, or Last Store Recovery, Together We Can, Cedar Recovery. These organizations have proven track records. They will be the ones that get the funding. We will set up a different kind of funding model than you've ever seen before. Normally, governments receive applications that have all the right buzzwords, they fork over the check, and afterwards a report is written. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is as long as all the paperwork is done. That ends. Here's how we're going to run our drug recovery program. Organizations are going to be paid a set fee for the number of months they keep addicts drug-free. And they will be paid more for harder cases. So if someone is a casual drug user and trying to break the addiction before it becomes serious, the funding might not need to be as much. It could be 10 or 15 counseling sessions for that person. But on the other hand, if it's an extreme addiction with someone living on the street for multiple years and on the verge of dying, well, obviously more funding would be needed for that. But the funding will be paid to organizations that successfully get people off drugs. Those organizations and interest groups who have been contributing to and complicit in the distribution of high-powered opioids and the harm production programs will be cut off, and they will be totally ineligible for any funding whatsoever. We need to break the addiction that these organizations have to keeping the crisis going. We're going to build it out based on the Alberta recovery model, which has shown a 40% reduction in the number of overdoses in 2023, more than 3 times what has happened in BC in that same time period. We will ensure that the Canadian people have hope that we can break the addiction and free our people from its grip. C'est pourquoi j'annonce aujourd'hui qu'un nouveau
That's why I'm also announcing today that a new Conservative government will fund the recovery and treatment of 50,000 Canadians. That promise is dedicated to the 50,000 Canadians we have lost to overdoses. Let them be an inspiration by saving these lives of an additional 50,000 Canadians. It has to be a program that breaks dependency and that gives people hope that they can rebuild their lives. Now, we owe Canadians who are still addicted an opportunity to not be added to that terrible number. They need to have access to recovery and treatment programs that are successful. That will include counseling, group therapy, professional training, transitional housing, in order to give people the tools that they need to rebuild their lives. We will support efficient and successful models, such as the one at the Bruce Oak Recovery Centre, that helps people go back to their communities and their family and their culture. We know that these institutions give real hope by through the Alberta recovery model that has already reduced the number of overdoses by 40%. But it's not enough to allow people a way out. We also have to put an end to liberal, failed policies that only make things worse. Policies that have destroyed lives and devastated families, they must be over. We must also ban drug consumption sites that are located within 500 meters of schools, daycares, hospitals, and other areas where vulnerable people may live.
To witness open drug use or related criminal activities as they walk by dangerous encampments. They shouldn't be stepping on dirty needles. Seniors out for a walk with their dog shouldn't be worried that the dog might become contaminated with a drug residue left in the grass. School parents in the Lower Mainland should not have to comb through an entire children's soccer field before every game to make sure there are no needles for their kids to step on. And by the way, that is not a hypothetical. That is what is happening. In the Lower Mainland today, when parents arrive to take their kids to soccer, they have a volunteer team that form a line and they walk up and down the field to remove all the drug paraphernalia, the crack pipes, and the needles. This is outrageous. We cannot go on like this. After the lost Liberal decade, we can't give them a 4th term. And that really is the choice. After a lost Liberal decade of crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder, through radical liberalization of drugs, can we elect them for a 4th term? Or do we need a change with a new Conservative government that will ban the drugs, lock up the mass traffickers, close the drug dens, and give treatment and recovery to the people we desperately want to save? And I'll just conclude thanking Giuseppe from the last historic recovery center, Kirk Boxton, who I'll be spending time with himself, a successful recovery story. On a note of hope, we can turn this around. You know, I was just talking to Cody a moment ago. He was homeless. And when he got taken off the street, the government put him in a hotel. He gets to the hotel, they put him in a room, knock at the door. Who is it? A drug dealer. Somehow someone informed the drug dealer in this hotel that there was a new person there. And he was feeling hopeless, and he was feeling lonely, and he succumbed to the temptation. So it was actually in this government hotel, government-funded hotel, that his addiction was re-sparked and restarted. There was no offer of recovery or treatment for him. A similar story for Kristen, who was in various different programs. None of them ever sought to get her off drugs. They continued, in these places, they continued to feed crack pipes and other paraphernalia into these people, keeping them hopelessly addicted and on the verge of death. That's not hope. That's not change. But these two incredible people turned their lives around. They got real recovery services. And now they've got jobs. They're contributing to our country. And in fact, I would say they have a superpower now, a superpower that almost no one has, because they've been to the bottom of the valley and they've climbed up to the mountaintop. And they now can inspire others to do the same. Every single person, every single one of you who's recovered, do not look at that past as a weakness. Look at it as a superpower. I need all of you. I need you to take your experience and go and lift someone else up. Grab that next person who's on a street corner, pull them up, and take them to care and break their addiction, to turn their lives around. That's how we're going to bring hope to this country. That's how we're going to bring real change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now go to questions. Please say your name and outlet.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre, Rahim Mohammed, National Post. First, thanks for making this an indoor event. I'm glad you have someone from the Lower Mainland on your advance team to give you a sense of our climate.
That's right.
The right call.
That's right. Well, you should have been with us in the South Okanagan the other day.
I grew up in Kamloops, man.
Oh, you know what it's all about.
Tugging my heartstrings. My heart's still in Kamloops.
I know. I almost announced I was going to be moving the capital to Osoyoos, but thought that
it should be New Westminster. You ever hear that story?
Maybe
Victoria.
We have time for a story.
Victoria stole it from under New Westminster.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Gee, somebody's got to do something.
Yeah, so the Victoria team, they switched up the speech that the New Westminster delegation was going to give, and the New Westminster guy fumbled and stumbled, and the capital ended up being in Victoria. I think that's how it went.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. Is that correct? I'd heard that story kind of second or third hand.
It's breaking news, everybody.
Sorry, we have to talk about fentanyl now. So as you know, President Trump is continuing to use Canada's fentanyl crisis as a smokescreen for his economic coercion of Canada, even though a number of his fellow lawmakers, including his fellow Republicans, are calling BS on his debunked premise that Canada is a major transit country for fentanyl ending up in the streets in the United States. Are you worried that some of the language that you have used surrounding Canada's fentanyl crisis, language like super labs, kingpins, concerns surrounding uninspected shipping containers at the ports, that any of that sort of language is going to give oxygen to President Trump's narrative, which looks to be on its last legs? And are you planning to tone down any of that sort of rhetoric?
Well, I have not used rhetoric. I've used facts. They are super labs. In fact, I think the police call them super labs. The RCMP announced that they had actually shut down a super lab, which had enough fentanyl to kill hundreds, if not thousands, of people. I couldn't care less what a foreign leader thinks about our fentanyl problem. As you noticed, I didn't mention any foreign leader in my speech, and I've been speaking about this for years. I put out a video about the fentanyl crisis in the Lower Mainland 2 years ago. And remember, everyone said that it was all wrong and all exaggerated. Now, everybody admits that not only was my identification of the problem correct, but so were all of my solutions. So I don't accept the idea that we should stop saving our kids from fentanyl overdoses because of something the United States is saying. The Americans have the American problem with fentanyl has nothing to do with Canada. But at the same time, we have to take care of our own people. I'm not doing this for anyone other than the people who are suffering from addictions, so that not one more mother has to answer the rap on the door from a police officer who's there to tell her that her little baby boy or girl died on a street corner somewhere. I'm doing this for the 50,000 people we have lost. And I totally reject the idea that we cannot solve the problems that are in our own country because of a foreign distraction. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the next question.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre. This is Janice from Fairchild Television. I want to get your response of many Chinese Canadian parents are increasingly worried about youth exposure to drugs. So how will your plan include prevention and education for youth in immigrant communities?
Thank you very much. And I want to take a moment to thank the Chinese community for leading the charge against the drug den in Richmond and against the radical drug liberalization agenda of the Liberal Party. First of all, we have to close the drug dens. No drug dens within 500 meters of schools, playgrounds, daycare centers, hockey arenas, or any other place where children should go. Secondly, we need to stop giving out taxpayer-funded hydromorphone pills, which are being systematically resold to children. Third, we need to bring in life sentences for fentanyl drug kingpins. These are anyone who is caught trafficking or producing more than 40 milligrams of fentanyl should get a life sentence. Fourth, we need to secure our borders with high-powered scanners and watchtowers to interrupt fentanyl ingredients from coming into our country. And finally, we need, for those young people who do get, unfortunately, connected with a life of drugs, we need to get them treatment and recovery services as soon as possible. We want, instead of having drug consumption sites, for example, we want to have a welcoming place for people who are addicted to come and get detox, maybe medication that will reduce the symptoms of withdrawal, give them counseling, and help them get connected with a recovery center whose goal is to make them drug-free. And that is how we're going to stop the spread of drugs and save our children. Thank you so much.
En français aussi, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. J'apprécie énormément
Thank you
le
very
travail
much.
de la
I very
communauté
much
chinoise
appreciate the
contre
work of the Chinese
les sites de
community
consommation de
with
la
respect
drogue,
to
surtout
these
à
drug
Richmond.
consumption sites,
La
particularly in
communauté
Richmond.
chinoise,
The Chinese
est
community
très, très courageuse,
is very
et,
brave
a bien mené la discussion
and
contre les
has
drogues.
led a real discussion
Moi, je vais,
on drug
comme
use.
on va mettre des
So what we're going to do is
de
ensure
fentanyl en
that
prison
mass
pour la vie.
traffickers of fentanyl
On va
will
bannir
receive a life
des,
sentence.
des
We will
drogues
ban
dures.
hard
On va
drugs.
arrêter de distribuer
We
des
will put a
opioïdes
stop
avec l'argent
to
des contribuables.
distribution
On va
of
fermer des centres de
opioids.
consommation de
We will
drogue,
shut down drug consumption
aux
sites
500 mètres
that
autour
are
des
located
écoles,
within
des
500
garderies
meters of
et d'autres
schools,
endroits où se
daycares,
trouvent
and
les
other
enfants.
areas where
On
children
va
will
fournir
be,
50 000
and we will
places pour les
provide
traitements,
50,000
de dépendance
spaces
avec le
for
but
treatment of addiction
permettre aux
with
gens
the
de
goal of
briser leur
allowing people to break
dépendance
their
à
dependency
100% et de
100%
devenir libre des
and
drogues.
become
Donc,
drug-free.
s'il y a un jeune qui
So
devient
if a young person
qui adapte une dépendance,
becomes
il va avoir
addicted,
un endroit où aller
that
pour
person will
briser
have a
cette
place to
dépendance
go to
et
break that
recommencer leur
dependency
vie.
and
C'est
restart
comme ça
his
qu'on va
life.
protéger nos
That's how we
enfants
will
des drogues.
protect
Merci
our
beaucoup.
children from
Thank you. We'll now
drugs.
take a question from the phone line.
Thank you.
Rob Shaw with Czech News.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre. There's 50 overdose prevention sites in BC. We have a premier here who supports them. As you know, the provinces control the administration of the healthcare system. In many cases, they're funding these recovery centers or putting in their own policies. So what would you say to our provincial government about what these changes mean for its ability to manage its healthcare system in this area with you as Prime Minister?
Well, we won't be making any changes to the healthcare system. We're saying is that drug use sites will be banned within 500 meters of schools, playgrounds, daycares, and other places where children go. They will not be allowed under the federal laws of the Drug and Controlled Drug and Substances Act. They will not be allowed if their goal is to perpetuate drug use. There should be a small number in limited cases that are open that, well, they welcome drug users in. They immediately offer them a path to recovery, give them a connection to a recovery program, offer them counseling on how to break their dependence and start their lives again. We know that the drug consumption sites have been a total disaster here in British Columbia and around the world. We know the research shows that they do not save lives or protect the community. We also know that they cause a massive risk when they are near children. My message is, we're not going to allow these drug dens near our kids or our vulnerable populations. Rather, we're going to move to put 50,000 of our loved ones into recovery and treatment programs so that we can get them off drugs. And I note that there has been a big change in the debate. I mean, when I first made these points 2 years ago, everybody said it was very controversial. But I persisted, and now it seems that the British Columbia government is changing its position and moving slowly towards recovery, and I applaud that. The Alberta model has been by far the most successful. Let's build on that success. And I would also say the only ones that seem to be committed to the free drugs and liberalization policy is the Liberal Party of Canada. They keep pushing this. They have not reversed their position. They still want to fund drugs and decriminalize hard drugs. They still want to give light prison sentences to the mass producers and traffickers who are killing our people. If you give the Liberals a fourth term in power, this problem will only get worse. That's why we need a new Conservative government that will ban the drugs, lock up the traffickers, invest in treatment and recovery to bring our loved ones home drug-free.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Le fédéral a la responsabilité
The federal
de donner
government
des
has a
exemptions
responsibility
pour des
to provide
centres de
exemptions
drogue.
to drug consumption
J'annonce
sites.
aujourd'hui que
But I am
si
announcing
les
today
conservateurs
that
sont
if
élus,
Conservatives
on va
are
pas permettre
elected,
des centres
we will
de
not
consommation
allow
de drogue,
drug consumption
de
sites
500 mètres
to be
vers les
located
écoles,
within 500
les
meters of
garderies,
schools, daycares,
des autres endroits où se trouvent
or
des gens
other
et des jeunes vulnérables.
facilities where there are vulnerable people or young
En
people.
plus,
In addition to
remplacer
that,
ces centres de
we will
consommation
replace
avec des
those
centres
consumption
de
sites
réhabilitation
with
pour
rehabilitation
briser la
sites to
dépendance
break
et
dependency
aider les gens
and
à ne
help
pas
people
être dépendants
to
sur les
no
drogues.
longer
C'est
be
comme ça qu'il
addicted.
va falloir agir.
That is
C'est
the
ça,
action
la
that is
preuve est
required.
là.
And
Le
the
modèle
evidence
en
is there
Alberta
that the
qui a
Alberta
réduit
model
la consommation
has
de drogue de
reduced
40% en
the
2023.
consumption of
Ça, c'est le
drugs by
modèle. Ça nous donne
40%.
l'espoir.
That is
C'est
a
ça,
good
le
model.
vrai
That gives us
changement
hope,
dont
and
le
that is
Canada a
real
besoin.
change, the
Thank
real
you.
change
We'll take
Canada
another question
needs.
from the phone line, and this will be the last question.
Marianne de Pelletot, Franco-Presse.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Hello, can you hear me?
Super,
Yes.
merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Poilievre.
Hello,
Marianne
Mr.
Despelletot de
Poilievre.
Franco-Presse.
Franco-Presse.
Quand Donald Trump est arrivé au pouvoir,
When
il a
Donald
sorti
Trump
son marqueur,
took
il a
power,
signé des décrets. Quand Trump
he
est
signed
arrivé au
executive
pouvoir, il a sorti son
orders.
marqueur, il a suspendu la taxe carbone. Vous, si vous devenez Premier ministre,
And
vous allez
what I'd
sortir
like to
votre
know is
marqueur et faire quoi? Quel sera votre tout premier
what
geste
your
comme
first
Premier ministre?
action will be as Prime Minister of Canada.
Merci de la question. La question, c'est
Thank you
quel
for the
geste
question.
est-ce que
The
je
question
vais
is,
prendre
what will my
immédiatement
first
devenant le
action
Premier
be
ministre du Canada
when I become Prime Minister of
si
Canada,
j'ai l'honneur?
if I have the honor
Premièrement, on
to
va
achieve
couper,
that?
les
First of
taxes et
all,
les
we will
impôts,
cut taxes,
c'est-à-dire réduire les impôts de 15%
reduce
pour
taxes by
les travailleurs
15% for
moyens et les aînés. On
workers
va
and
enlever le
seniors.
TPS pour
We
les
will
nouvelles
remove
maisons pour
GST on new
économiser une
homes
jeune famille jusqu'à
to
65
save
000
a young family up to
On va éliminer le TPS pour
$65,000.
les
We will
voitures
remove
faites au
the
Canada.
GST on
Et on va
Canadian-made
rapidement
vehicles,
abroger la
and we
loi
will
C-69.
immediately
C'est
repeal
une
Bill
loi qui empêche la
C-69. This is
construction de
legislation legislation that prevents the construction of mines, natural gas plants, and other natural resource projects so that we can reduce our dependence on the United States. A law that Mr. Carney says he wants to keep. So after the lost Liberal decade, where costs and crime are up and our economy is down under the thumb of the United States, we cannot risk another term for the Liberals. We need a change to put Canada first, a new Conservative government that will cut taxes, build housing, develop our natural resources, and bring back jobs to Canada, and stand up to the United States with strength.
The question was, what are going to be my first actions on becoming Prime Minister? Well, first of all, I will be cutting taxes for Canadians. I'll be cutting income tax by 15%, so workers and seniors bring home more of what they have earned. Second, we'll take the GST, the federal sales tax, off new homes and Canadian-made cars, so Canadians can afford a roof overhead and an automobile made in our country. Third, I will repeal the Anti-Energy and Resource Law C-69. This is the law that will make it impossible to build pipelines, mines, LNG plants that Mark Carney announced last week he will keep in place. After the lost Liberal decade of rising crime and costs and a falling economy under America's thumb, we cannot afford a Liberal fourth term. We need a new Conservative government who will axe taxes, build homes, unleash our resources, and bring home our jobs so we can stand up to the Americans from a place of strength for a change.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The event today.
You're just listening in there to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre making an announcement in New Westminster, BC, about Canada's drug problems. He says that a new Conservative government would fund drug addiction recovery and treatment for 50,000 Canadians who need it. He says Canada has lost 50,000 people to drugs, and in their honor, they need to save 50,000 more lives. Bottom line out of all of it, he says they want to close drug dens, especially in vulnerable communities where there are schools, daycares, and playgrounds, lock up drug traffickers, and help addicts recover. Let's bring in CBC's Alexander Silberman. He's been listening in from Ottawa as well with us. Alexander, what stands out for you?
Well, Pierre Poilievre's announcement there focused on the addiction crisis, a top concern for voters in BC in particular. He mentioned some of the numbers off the top there on the thousands of people that have died from this public health crisis, really staggering numbers here, equating that to a mid-sized Canadian city lost when we look at the number of people that have died from this issue. The Conservatives, though, are positioning themselves to take a really hardline approach when it comes to this issue and combating addiction. We heard Poilievre there talking about cracking down on crime, cracking down on going after drug dealers, while also promising at the same time to expand treatment options, take a treatment-focused approach, and shift away from supervised injection sites. Poilievre was very critical of those overdose prevention sites based on what we heard him say, which have become a heated and contentious political issue in BC and other parts of this country. We heard him there promising to prevent provinces from opening these sites, these supervised injection sites, without federal approval, so not being able to do that unilaterally. And Poilievre also says he will ban sites from opening within 500 meters of vulnerable locations. So we're talking about places like schools, daycares, and seniors' homes. Now Poilievre is stopping short of shutting those sites down entirely, important to point that out, but he does say they would have to meet strict federal standards, things like undergoing annual reviews, and if they don't meet those standards under a tight timeline, they would be shut down by the federal government. Poilievre also going on to say he would suspend approval of these new sites until he sees what he calls clear evidence that they support recovery. On the recovery side, Poilievre is promising to create a $1 billion recovery fund detox treatment centers. He mentioned a couple of examples that he thinks are effective, and also to fund other addictions recovery services.
And you know, BC, seen by some as an election battleground for the Conservatives, how does that factor into this announcement?
Well, BC is home to many close battleground ridings, Asha, and many could see some tight races in this election. And you also have the issue there, the big issue of tariffs on softwood lumber, having a really devastating impact on the provincial economy. So it's very much a focus region for all the parties, with the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP all fighting, all competing to maintain and try and expand their pockets of support in that province. Poilievre has already spent a few days in the province, campaigning there yesterday as well, and Liberal leader Mark Carney expected to be there soon for a meeting he has scheduled with Premier David Eby for tomorrow to talk about softwood lumber. You also have the Green Party in the mix in BC as well. They typically do well in a few ridings. So you have a lot of 3 and even some 4-way races. But with this decline in support for the NDP and some of those voters perhaps supporting the Liberals based on what we're seeing in the polls, it could be a boost to the Conservatives. Now, recent provincial election results in BC's election that they just had this fall showed there are many regions with a strong base of Conservative voters. So the Conservative Party is hoping to try and tap into those voters and get them to show up for the federal party and potentially flip some ridings.
All right, Alexander Silberman in Ottawa, thank you. We take you now to Long Island, New York, where a long-standing NHL record has finally been broken.
Here is Ovechkin. Shoots. He scores! He scores! Number 895!
Alex Ovechkin has overtaken Wayne Gretzky's record for the most regular season NHL goals. The 39-year-old Russian scored number 895, you heard it there, against the Islanders. Both Gretzky and NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman were in attendance. The game was stopped after the goal for a ceremony to mark the occasion. I'm sure the partying will go into the night. You're watching CBC News Network. The threat of tariffs is not only causing economic stress, but has set off a whole range of emotions for Canadians. The stress and the worry has us turning to an expert about how to help cope with all of the pressure. We're joined by Christine Purdon, a professor of psychology at the University of Waterloo and also a registered psychologist. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So, how does all this political turbulence impact us, impact our mental health?
So I think it's a lot of new information coming fast and furiously, introducing both existential threat and practical threat, complete change in the New World Order, complete change in thinking about things. So I think it puts us in a state of some hypervigilance where we're feeling like we need to be monitoring and keeping abreast of things, where we have our radar out for new threats, et cetera. And that puts us on edge. That activates our anxious system.
I mean, people are reading the headlines, they're watching the news, they're talking about it with their colleagues and friends and family. News about the tariffs, especially on the auto sector, causing this anxiety and uncertainty about how it's going to trickle down, and hurt us. What are some effective strategies, though, for managing all of that anxiety, especially when you're triggered by it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so much. And I think the first thing to recognize is that the amount of information available is absolutely inexhaustible now. And that I really think that we need to engage in portion control and to really start to think mindfully about the amount of information we're seeking, how we're seeking it, and start thinking about potentially planning, like check in the morning, check in the evening, and just stay away from it. Otherwise, because if something major happens, you're going to find out about it. So you're not in danger of missing something absolutely crucial. But the reason for controlling it, or your amount of use, is that it can consume all of your thoughts. It can consume your whole day and just keep escalating anxiety. And there are other things going on in the world besides these really upsetting and stressful kinds of events. And I think, too, we need to be careful about our conversations with other people, because we can fall into both monitoring our social media, et cetera, for information, but then also exhaustive conversations with people. And I think it's really important to debrief and then move on to positive, pleasant things. Or as a youth organization I know is holding a vent and scheme event where they get together to vent, but then they start planning action.
That's really interesting. I want to talk about that all-consuming mind overload for a minute here. I think of myself, full disclosure, and I run into hypotheticals just over and over again. How can people tell the difference, though, between reasonable concern and that excessive worry?
Yeah, I think that is such a good question. So I think reasonable concern is recognizing the problems that are in the here and now that are high probability and imminent. And those are the ones we need to save our energy for solving. We can easily think about down the road about implications. If this happens, then that happens. If that happens, then that happens. If that happens, then that happens. And the problem is we then start to be trying to solve problems that haven't happened yet. It's like trying to solve an algebra equation with too many unknowns. You can't get a solution, and it actually ends up in worry escalation rather than worry de-escalation. Like we think we're planning and preventing, and thereby finding ways of preventing things from happening, but we don't have enough information to solve the problems because they're nowhere near as imminent or concrete yet. So I think we need to check our mental tense and find out, am I in the catastrophic future? Because if I am, I need to be back here in the here and now.
Mm-hmm. You talk about action, so we want to know, are there specific mindfulness or relaxation techniques that you can recommend for us to cope?
Yeah, I think I think people need to rely on what helps them the most. Like for some people, mindfulness is great. Other people, it just doesn't work. So I think what's really important is finding ways to focus on the things that give you pleasure and peace and beauty and joy in your life, as well as things that make you feel like you have some control. So whether that's activism or reducing the demands on your environment so that you can manage everything coming fast and furiously better. So I think it's really about sitting down and thinking, what's on my plate? What can I do to build in things other than this focusing on these catastrophic events? So building in, gardening or making a good cup of coffee, those sorts of things. So I think people are very resilient and people have their own ways of calming. And I think really making a conscious attempt to draw on those resources is very important right now.
I know this might seem as if it's another thing to worry about in terms of hypotheticals, but it also might be a warning for people. If you have all this stress over time, what can it do?
So I think chronic stress is problematic. It interferes with sleep. It interferes with well-being and capacity to function. And I think that we want to be careful of our stress levels. It's very normal. Of course, I should have started by saying it's very normal to feel stressed when things are stressful. But I think what we want to be on the lookout for are feeling anxious, overwhelmed, highly stressed all day, every day, and not being able to find joy or peace at all day, every day for sort of weeks on end, to the point where it's really starting to interfere with our capacity to manage our social and work and family relationships. And that may be a time for maybe seeking some extra support in managing what's happening in the environment.
I've been writing down some notes. I hope other Canadians have too. Great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor of Psychology at the University of Waterloo, Dr. Christine Purdon. A second child has died at a Texas hospital while being treated for measles. The death of the school-aged child on Thursday is the second in the state from the viral respiratory illness. Health officials reported in February an 8-year-old girl had died after contracting measles. Texas has reported more than 480 cases of the disease. There are 600 cases across the U.S. Officials say the outbreak involves mostly unvaccinated patients or those of unknown status. More news is ahead. Stay with us. We want to show you the scene earlier today in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is at what's being called an Elbows Up Canada rally there. The event was meant to boost Canadian pride amid Trump's trade war. Earlier, Singh was across the harbour in Halifax, where he unveiled an NDP pledge over rent reforms. He's been in Atlantic Canada all weekend and heads to Montreal tonight. Earlier today, Singh focused on national rent control, laid out his plan to protect tenants from unfair increases at a campaign stop the one in Halifax. Singh says the government needs to step up to support people struggling to pay rent. The CBC's Janice McGregor has those details.
Jagmeet Singh met with renters in a Halifax cafe this morning, hearing their anxieties about how unstable and unaffordable the housing market here has become. The NDP platform includes a new National Renters' Bill of Rights to bring in some rent controls, but also crack down on predatory landlords who jack up rents, but also force people out of their homes. Now, these are concerns that normally would be issues in provincial or municipal election campaigns, but Singh says the lack of stable and affordable rentals is a national crisis, and so the federal government needs to use its spending power to force other jurisdictions to change.
Other municipalities have passed laws that ban rent evictions. We want to see those laws passed in a municipality if they want federal funds. Other provinces have rent control in place. Well, we want to see true rent control with fixed term leases removed if you want federal funds. So it's a condition of funding.
This Halifax riding was already several weeks into a by-election campaign when the general election was called. It's an open seat because the previous Liberal MP, Andy Fillmore, resigned to run for mayor. The NDP candidate here, Lisa Roberts, is a former provincial MLA and housing critic. Before the Liberals won it in 2015, it was an NDP seat. After being shut out entirely in Atlantic Canada in the last election, Jagmeet Singh is hoping to persuade Haligonians that they need to elect a New Democrat again to fight for them. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Halifax.
Now, Liberal leader Mark Carney left Ottawa this hour to head to the West Coast. He'll be making a campaign stop in BC today. It's his first visit to the province since he called the election 2 weeks ago. CBC's Catherine Tunney has more from the campaign trail.
Liberal leader Mark Carney is taking his campaign to Canada's West Coast for the first time, hoping to shore up seats in battleground British Columbia, a key province as the Liberals hope to do what seemed nearly impossible just a few months ago and form government. Carney's first stop will be to the capital, Victoria, a riding that has voted NDP going back to 2006. But as that party's fortunes fall, the Liberals are hoping to flip it red. Carney is meeting with supporters and candidates tonight, but isn't expected to make an announcement today. While in the province, he'll meet with BC Premier David Eby to discuss mounting anxiety in the forestry industry. The meeting comes as the U.S. is set to more than double the duty it charges on softwood lumber imports from Canada. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
All right, taking you to a suburb of Montreal where Bloc Qubcois leader Yves-François Blanchet is campaigning. I'm going to see if we have that to show you right now. I see the tape there, and we're going to take a listen in when we can. Here we go.
Parce que plus les tarifs imposés par les Américains sont élevés, plus l'effet inflationniste aux États-Unis est élevé et moins longtemps les États-Unis sont capables de maintenir de tels tarifs sur le long terme. Donc, on peut espérer que ça dure le moins longtemps possible. C'est la raison pour laquelle l'industrie forestière demandait du financement transitoire qui peut très bien prendre simplement la forme de prêt ou de garantie de prêt et que nous, on a fait le raisonnement d'élargir ça à tout secteur industriel qui en aura besoin.
Prochaine question. Bonjour, Anne Côté, Journal Éveil, Journal Nord-Info. Vous parlez de petites et moyennes entreprises.
You've talked about SMEs, but there are some big players here as well, like PACCAR. And recently, President Trump announced tariffs in that area. There was supposed to be a meeting, but the meeting was canceled. So things are not looking very good. Are you talking about new support measures for even those larger companies? Yes, of course. My first reaction is to say, yes, it's true that we were supposed to have a meeting, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, it was canceled. But that's not the first time we've seen this happen as members of the Bloc. But even if we haven't had a meeting with them, we are fully aware of their concerns. And, for example, I know that there are issues about the U.S. tariffs, and they know that since they've discussed this with me, I've really worked hard to try and support them. There are, and all our members of Parliament are working as well on these issues. Now, when we saw the recent, very short-lived Carney government do things, well, we wanted to make sure that the same determination and protection would be applied to, you know, any sector of the economy that is located in Quebec. And for now, we haven't heard anything about that. And that's an illustration of the fact that, you know, Quebecers have an opportunity to impose their will and ensure that Canada cannot reach an agreement with the U.S. that does not preserve Quebec's economy. And we can even make arrangements to have an agreement in place that will help Quebec and meet its interests. And that is what the Bloc is proposing.
Voilà, bien au plaisir.
All right, we were just listening in to Bloc Qubcois leader Yves-François Blanchet campaigning in a Montreal suburb this afternoon. CBC's Alexander Silverman has been following along, and he joins me now from Ottawa with more. So I only caught, you know, the Q&A a little bit, but just wondering what stood out for you and if you're able to hear the whole thing, because I know you were listening in.
Yes, that's right. I didn't quite catch the whole thing, but enough of that announcement to have a few takeaways. This was an announcement around supporting small and medium-sized businesses in Quebec under the context of this trade war and the pressure a lot of businesses are under in the country right now. Blanchet pledging that the Bloc Qubcois would be a good choice for people concerned about their jobs, for small, medium-sized businesses, and that he'll be there to fight for them if the Bloc elects a number of MPs. So the announcement was around pledging to push Canada Post to offer the same types of discounts that it offers to larger companies that are able to qualify for these large volume discounts for postage rates, and to push for that to be available, these lower postage rates for small and medium-sized businesses, be able to save them a bit on shipping costs. Another part of that announcement was pledging to push to drop the GST on certain goods, including used items that are sold in retail stores. So that was kind of interesting. Also pledging to drop the GST on repairs for items. If you go see a tailor, for instance, that would no longer have GST. Another part of that announcement as well, dropping the federal tax, the GST, on books. Books are currently tax-free for the provincial sales tax portion in the province of Quebec. We've heard booksellers, bookstores say that they're concerned about the potential impact of tariffs, and Blanchet there pledging to drop GST, advocate for that for book sales. So a number of business-related proposals really driven by the economic state that we're in, concerns over the economy, concerns over what this trade war will mean for small and medium-sized businesses, really tailored to try and meet the needs of voters in Quebec who are concerned about those things, and to try and meet their concerns and try and turn things around for the Bloc, which has seen a decline in the polls lately and doesn't quite have the momentum that they had a few months ago. So they're hoping with policies like these that they'll be able to really turn things around, drum up some more support, and that the results that we're seeing, the projections that we're seeing in the polls rather, will turn things around, and that the actual results when voters head to the polls will be very different.
Yes, timely and topical given the economic times. Thank you, Alexander, for always being there to break it down for us. Appreciate you.
Thank you.